The lobby of the Hanwoo Grand smelled like white lilies and old money. Queenie stood in the middle of it with one heel in her hand, the strap having given out somewhere around the second red light she'd run, and did the math on how long it would take to become invisible again once this was over. "I'm here for the Kang family gathering," she said, for the second time, because the receptionist's face hadn't changed the first time. "Mr. Kang Soo-hoo is expecting me." The girl's eyes went down, then up, slow enough that Queenie felt every inch of the trip. "I'm sorry. This event is private." "I know it's private. I'm his wife." The receptionist's smile flattened into something colder. She glanced sideways at her coworker before answering, like she needed a witness for what she was about to say. "Mr. Kang's wife," she repeated, doubtful. "I'm sure. Excuse me. It's just, Mr. Kang could have anyone." The second staff member had drifted closer now, arms crossed, openly amused. "It's a little hard to believe he'd marry someone like you." Queenie felt the words land exactly where they were aimed. "Someone like me. You know what I mean." The first receptionist didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable saying it. "We get women like you here all the time, trying to get close to men like him. It's not exactly subtle." "I'll need to see identification," the second one added, folding her arms, "since I'm sure you understand why we can't just take your word for it." "It's in my bag, which is in my car, which is running illegally outside your doors right now, so if you'd just call up." "We can't let just anyone up because they say they belong here." The first receptionist's voice had a practiced, sugared cruelty to it now, the kind that knew it could hide behind policy. "Your kind isn't exactly on the guest list tonight, if you understand me." The words hit somewhere old. Queenie had heard every polished version of this sentence her whole life, in boardrooms, in bridal shops, in a Seoul waiting room when she was 7 and still learning what stares meant. She'd built an entire company out of making people regret saying things like this to her face. But she had no ID, no phone, and a lobby full of strangers now watching a black woman get told, smilingly, exactly what she was and wasn't allowed to be in this building. "Call upstairs," she said, quieter now. "Please. Just call up." Neither of them reached for the phone. "Excuse me." The voice came from her left, a woman, 50s maybe, already crossing the marble. "What exactly are you checking for?" she asked the receptionist. "Because I've watched 3 people walk past this desk tonight with nothing but a smile. The only difference I can see is her skin." "This doesn't concern you, ma'am." "It concerns me because I'm standing here, watching you decide who deserves to be believed." She held her phone out, already unlocked. "Call whoever you need." Queenie's hands weren't steady. She dialed anyway, and the woman stayed beside her the entire time, arms loosely crossed, radiating the calm of someone who'd decided long ago exactly how much of this she was willing to watch happen in front of her. "You didn't have to do that," Queenie said. "I know what this feels like." The woman's eyes flicked once toward the desk, then back. "I wasn't going to stand here and watch it happen to someone else." The line picked up. "It's me," Queenie said, before Soo-hoo could finish saying hello. "I'm downstairs, I need." She didn't get to finish. The elevator doors were already opening. He didn't walk across that lobby. He crossed it the way you cross a room when the wrongness of it hits you before you've worked out what's wrong. He kissed her before either of them decided he would. "Sorry I'm late," he said against her mouth. Then he turned, and the warmth left his face entirely. "You." He didn't raise his voice. "Pack your things. You're finished here. Tonight." "Sir, I was only—" "You told my wife her kind wasn't welcome in my hotel." His voice stayed level, which somehow made it worse. "I don't need a second reason beyond that one." He turned to the other one, pale now. "And you stood there deciding whether a black woman deserved to be believed when she told you exactly who she was. That makes you finished too." The floor manager hurried over, already apologizing to no one in particular. Soo-hoo didn't look at him. "Badges on my desk before this event is over." Then, only then, something in him softened. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I'm angry." "There's a difference." The corner of his mouth moved. "There she is." He looked back at the 2 women behind the desk. "What do you want done with them, beyond fired?" She held the first one's eyes a long moment. People like them don't deserve to be the first faces guests see when they walk through that door. Firing them is the least of it. But it's a start. Consider it started, he said, already reaching for his phone. She turned to thank the woman who'd lent her the phone, but she'd already drifted back toward the party with nothing more than a small nod. If you've ever had to prove, out loud, that you belong somewhere you already had every right to be, you already know exactly what that walk to the desk costs. Welcome to Afro-Korean Vibes, where we tell the love stories that make you feel every bit of the joy, the justice, and the healing that real love deserves. Stay till the end, this one's going somewhere. Han-suk caught Queenie by the terrace doors before she'd even set down her drink. Something happened downstairs. I'm fine, Mom. That wasn't the question. Han-suk studied her, the spine held a fraction too straight, the smile gone brittle at the edges. I've known that face since you were 5 years old and wouldn't tell me what the other children said to you at lunch. It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. It's just wearing an adult's clothes now. Queenie's throat tightened. She glanced toward the bar, where Soo-hoo stood half listening to his mother, one eye finding its way back to her every few seconds like he couldn't help it. Later, she said. I promise. Not here. Han-suk let it go, though it clearly cost her. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind Queenie's ear, the same gesture she'd used since Queenie was small enough to need it after every hard day at school. The first time I saw that face on you, you were 5. Some boy at the orphanage told you nobody would ever choose you, because of your skin, because you were too much of everything all at once. You didn't cry. You just went very still, the way you're standing right now. I remember. I sat on that floor next to you because nobody else would get down there with you. I asked if you liked rice cakes. Han-suk smiled, eyes wet. You didn't answer for 10 minutes. You just watched me, waiting to see if I'd leave. You didn't leave. I was never going to leave. I signed those papers 3 weeks later, and I have never once, in 21 years, looked at you and thought I chose wrong. Whatever happened down there tonight, they don't get to win. Not against everything I built you into. Queenie held her mother's hands. I love you, Mom. I know. Han-suk squeezed once hard. Now go breathe for a minute. And tell me the rest tonight. All of it. All of it was more than Han-suk knew to ask for, because the truth she still didn't know was that the marriage she'd been so proud of arranging had never been meant to last past a year. It had started 8 months earlier, at a dinner Han-suk had orchestrated with the same quiet confidence she used for everything else in her daughter's life. My oldest friend has a son, she'd said, setting down her tea. Soo-hoo. Runs the Hanwoo Hotel Group. Kind, from what I hear. Lonely, though he'd never admit it. Mom, I don't need you finding me anyone. I know you don't need it. I want it. Queenie had gone to that dinner already composing her exit line. Instead, she'd found a man who didn't flinch when she threatened, mid-appetizer, to review the restaurant to 4 million followers if her order came out wrong twice, just watched her with something between surprise and the first real amusement he'd shown all night. You're not what I expected, he'd said. Neither are you. I expected someone more full of himself, running one of the biggest hotel chains in the country. Give it time, he'd said, and meant it as a private hope that she never would. Neither of them had wanted the marriage, not really. Both mothers wanted it enough for 4 people. We give them the wedding, she'd told him weeks before it happened. A year, so it doesn't look like a joke to anyone watching. Then we end it quietly. No headlines, no hard feelings. He'd looked at her long enough that she'd almost taken it back. All right, he'd said. She had no way of knowing what agreeing had cost him, that he'd said yes, because he didn't want her choosing him out of obligation, and a year, he'd told himself, was enough time to find out if she'd choose him anyway. She thought he'd agreed because he didn't want her either. That single, quiet misunderstanding was already, 8 months later, costing them both more than either of them could admit, standing in a hallway with her mother's hands still warm around hers. The party wound down slowly after that. By the time they reached the car, Soo-hoo's hand had settled at the small of Queenie's back, and neither of them mentioned it. You never told me what you actually wanted done with them, he said, once they were both inside. Beyond fired. I said what I wanted. You gave me a headline. I want the real answer. I wanted them to know what it costs to decide someone doesn't matter before they've even opened their mouth. He didn't say anything to that. He just reached over and laced his fingers through hers on the seat between them, and for once neither of them pretended it was for anyone else's benefit. For days passed before either of them mentioned the kiss again. She found him in the kitchen on the 5th night, sleeves rolled, making the specific overcooked eggs he always made when he was avoiding sleep rather than seeking food. "You didn't have to kiss me," she said, from the doorway. "You wanted me to let them keep guessing whose wife you were? That's not what I asked. It's the only answer I've got." He turned the heat down, finally facing her. "Did it bother you?" Bother wasn't the word. The word was closer to unravel. "I'm asking if you make a habit of it," she said instead. "Kissing people to make a point." "Only the one person," he said. "So far." The kitchen went quiet in a way that had weight to it. "That's not an answer," she said, quieter now. "I know." He held her eyes a second too long, then turned back to the stove. "Sit down. You've barely eaten since it happened." It wasn't just it. It was a hate crime with a dress code. "Sit down, Queenie." She sat. He put a plate in front of her and settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, and neither of them moved the half-inch it would have taken to stop. They ate in a silence that didn't feel like it needed filling, until she caught him watching her instead of his own plate. "What?" "Nothing." He looked back down. "You eat like you're mad at the food." "I am mad at the food. It's 4 scrambled eggs at midnight. It's a delicacy. It's a cry for help." "Only the one cry," he said. "So far." She threw a piece of rice at him. He caught it, midair, without looking, and ate it like it had always belonged to him. This became the shape of the next several months, and not just in the kitchen. It showed up everywhere, in small ways neither of them was willing to name. At his cousin's engagement party, 6 months in, an aunt watched them across the room for a full minute before turning to Han-suk. "They finish each other's sentences," she said. "Have you noticed? He starts something, she finishes it, and neither of them seems to realize they've done it." "I've noticed," Han-suk said, entirely too pleased with herself. At the office, Suho's assistant had stopped being surprised when he left meetings early for calls from a supplier, which everyone on the floor had quietly figured out were calls from his wife, given how his voice changed the moment he picked up. When a junior associate made an offhand comment about it in the break room, "The boss is completely gone for her. It's honestly embarrassing." 3 other people nodded before realizing they'd all noticed the same thing independently. Queenie's own team wasn't much better. Her creative director had taken to timing how long it took her to smile after a text came in from Suho on her phone, and had made it a running, silent bet among the design team that nobody had the nerve to say to her face. Neither of them saw any of it. Or rather, they saw it and immediately filed it under something safer, something more survivable than the truth. "He's just considerate. She's just easy to get along with. This is what a good arrangement looks like, nothing more." 7 months in, lying in the dark after a night neither of them wanted to end, Queenie had caught herself thinking, clear as anything, "I could do this forever," and had gotten up for water instead of examining what that meant. Because a year had an end date, and she didn't trust herself not to be the only one who'd miscounted the days. What she didn't tell anyone, not Han-suk, not her own reflection some mornings, was that the bloodline comment, when it came, wasn't the first time she'd heard some version of it. There had been a cousin's wife at Chuseok months earlier who'd asked Suho's mother, just loud enough, whether it wasn't a lot to explain to people when grandchildren eventually came. There had been an uncle at a birthday dinner who'd made a joke about diluting the family photos that everyone had laughed at like it wasn't a joke at all. There had been small, glancing comments at 3 separate gatherings that Queenie had absorbed and folded away and never once repeated to Suho, because saying them out loud would have made them real and some worn. Practice part of her still believed that swallowing things quietly was the price of being allowed in the room at all. She'd told herself each time that it didn't matter as long as Suho never said anything like it himself. That had been true every time, until the investor dinner made it feel like the sheer volume of it, 8 months of small cuts nobody else seemed to notice, had finally added up to something she couldn't carry politely anymore. The investor dinner arrived 2 weeks after that party, the kind Suhu usually attended alone, except this time his mother had insisted Queenie come, so everyone can finally see the two of you together properly. Queenie wore red because she liked the way it made older men uncomfortable to look directly at her. Suhu stayed close all evening, a hand at her back, a look across the table when someone said something insufferable, the private shorthand of two people who'd started, without meaning to, actually being a team. "You're doing the jaw thing," she murmured, during dessert, when an investor's wife asked for the third time when they were finally giving Hansuk grandchildren. "I don't have a jaw thing. You have several. That one's number 2. I would never." "You absolutely would." She smiled at the woman instead, sweet as anything. "We're taking our time. Some things shouldn't be rushed." Under the table, his hand found her knee, just once, and she let herself lean the smallest amount into his shoulder before catching herself and sitting back up. She excused herself before the second round of drinks. It was on her way back, rounding the corner past the private dining room the older men had drifted into, that she heard her husband's name. Shame, honestly, if they never have children. Better for everyone if that line just ends there. No need to complicate the Kang name with all of that. A ripple of quiet, cowardly agreement. Queenie stood frozen, one hand flat against the wall. It wasn't just this comment. It was every version of it she'd swallowed for 8 months, every one she'd told herself didn't count because it hadn't come from him, and now here it was, in a room full of men whose approval controlled half of what Suhu had built his life on. And no one at that table had said a single word to stop it. "He's going to let this be the version of us that everyone believes," she thought, and didn't wait to hear if she was wrong. She turned, walked past the terrace, texted her driver from the front steps with hands gone past shaking into something stiller and colder, and was already in the car by the time Suhu noticed the seat beside him was empty. Inside, his glass hit the table hard enough that conversation stopped. "Say that again," he said. Slowly. "So I'm sure I understood you correctly." Nobody said it again. "I don't care about the Kang name," he continued, each word deliberate. "I don't care about bloodlines or legacies or whatever any of you think you're protecting. If my wife and I have a child, that child will be hers. That's the only lineage I've ever cared about. And I'd like to know which one of you thought that was acceptable to say at my table, whether or not she was standing here to hear it." Nobody answered. Across the table, Adiz set her glass down, hands not quite steady, surprised by how close she was to tears over a stranger's marriage. "Where's Queenie?" Suhu asked, scanning the room. The seat beside his had been empty for longer than he wanted to admit. He found the apartment dark except for the kitchen light, Queenie at the island with her shoes still on, a stillness on her he'd never seen before. "Queenie, I don't want to talk about it tonight. I need to explain what happened after you left." "I know what happened. I heard enough." She looked up at him, nothing performed in it at all. "I think we should stop waiting out the years, Suhu. There's no reason left to. Did I do something?" "You didn't do anything." She said it too fast, and heard how it sounded, and made herself slow down. "That's actually the problem. This wasn't the first time, Suhu. It's been 8 months of comments I never told you about, because telling you made them real, and I kept telling myself it didn't matter as long as it never came from you. And then tonight I stood outside that room and realized I've spent 8 months falling in love with someone who agreed to a year, and I have no idea if any of it was real for you or if I'm just the only one who forgot we had an end date. I would rather end it now, on my terms, than find out in 4 more months that I built an entire life around a feeling only I was having." He stared at her, something in his chest dropping the way a floor drops when a building gives out beneath it. "You think this isn't real for me?" "I don't know what to think." "You never said." "I didn't say because I promised myself I'd never make you feel cornered into staying." His voice cracked slightly, and he didn't bother hiding it. 8 months ago you were a stranger I owed a wedding to. Somewhere between then and now, I started building my whole day around whether you'd still be awake when I got home. I thought we were building something. Was I the only one? "No," she said, quiet now, some of the certainty going out of her. "You weren't the only one." "That's exactly why I'm scared." He studied her for a long moment, looking for the seam where the truth actually was. Okay, he said finally, something closing behind his eyes. If ending it is what actually keeps you safe from all of this, the comments, the room, everything I apparently didn't do enough to stop, then okay. I won't fight you on it. I promised myself a long time ago I'd never make you feel trapped, and I meant that even now. He turned and walked back toward the bedroom, and she sat there long after she heard the door close, replaying the sentence he hadn't finished. I thought we were building something. Wondering if walking away from the wreckage of a lie might end up costing her the one true thing that had grown inside it. If you've ever loved someone quietly, carrying every unkind word alone because saying it out loud felt like giving it power, you are not weak for that. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. But you deserve someone who wants to carry it with you, not someone you have to hide your pain from to keep the peace. Han-suk noticed it over dinner 3 nights later, the pushed-around food, the half-beat late answers, the brittle performance of fine. Something's wrong. And don't tell me you're tired. You've been tired for 8 months. This isn't that. I'm handling it, Mom. I didn't ask if you were handling it. Han-suk stilled her daughter's restless hands. Talk to me. Queenie held out exactly as long as it took her mother to simply wait. We're getting divorced. It was never supposed to be real, Mom. A year, so it wouldn't look like a joke, then a quiet end. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel like your matchmaking had failed. Han-suk went very still. You let me watch you fall in love with that man for 8 months without saying a word. I didn't plan to fall in love with him. I know you didn't. Han-suk's voice cracked. I have watched him look at you like you hung the moon over that hotel of his. You don't ask to leave someone you love that much over an old agreement. Something happened. What happened? And there, finally, Queenie said all of it, not just the one dinner, but the months of smaller comments she'd swallowed before it, the fear that she'd fallen alone, the decision to leave before she found out for certain that she had. Han-suk listened without interrupting, and when Queenie finished, gripped her daughter's hands hard enough to hurt. You've been carrying 8 months of other people's cruelty by yourself, and then you built a divorce out of being afraid to ask him one honest question. You didn't even stay to hear if he defended you this time, and you never told him about all the times before. Her thumb moved over Queenie's knuckles, old and worn. You are not that 5-year-old on the orphanage floor anymore. You don't have to run before anyone gets the chance to prove you wrong. Go talk to him. Not to end something. To find out what you actually missed, and tell him what you never let yourself say before tonight. What if I missed something worse? Then you'll know, Han-suk said, instead of guessing for the rest of your life. She found him in his office 2 nights later, jacket off, tie loosened. Can we talk? He looked up, carefully neutral. Of course. She sat across from him and made herself say the true thing first. I heard them at the dinner. But that wasn't the first time, Suhu. It's been 8 months of comments like that one, smaller, at Chuseok, at your uncle's birthday, and I never told you, because saying them out loud made them real, and some part of me still believes staying quiet is the price of being allowed in the room. I let all of it build up instead of telling you, and then I heard one more and decided the safest thing was to leave before I found out I'd fallen in love by myself. Suhu went very still. You've been carrying that alone for 8 months. Yes. Queenie, he stopped, started again, and this time didn't measure the words at all. I told them I didn't care about the Kong name. I told them if we ever had a child, that child would be hers, the only lineage I've ever cared about. I told the whole room never to say something like that again, anywhere near my wife's name. He exhaled. I meant every word. Not because I was defending an arrangement. Because I love you. I have for longer than you probably want to hear. How long? Since the first dinner. Since the restaurant threat. A small, pained smile. I agreed to the year because I didn't want you choosing me out of obligation. I wanted you to have room to choose me for real. I didn't expect that giving you that room would feel like losing you the moment you actually used it. I built an ending out of silence, she said, mine and yours both. I'm sorry I didn't trust you with any of it sooner. You're here now. Am I too late? He reached over and took her hand. You were never going to be too late. Not for me. They didn't leave the office right away. I have conditions, she said eventually, for staying. Of course you do. No more overcooked eggs at midnight. That's an insult to a very good egg. It was a war crime, Suhu. He laughed, pulled her up by the hand he was still holding, until she was close enough that neither of them had to reach far for the rest of it. One more thing, she said, quieter now, forehead nearly against his. Don't let me carry things alone anymore. Not the small comments, not the big ones. All of it from now on. Even the parts that would be easier to let me miss. Deal. He kissed her, slow, settled. Come home. 3 weeks of quiet followed, the kind neither of them had let themselves trust before. It was a Thursday when she collapsed, exhaustion, low blood pressure, a body finally cashing in months of skipped meals and no sleep. She woke to Suhu's hand wrapped around hers, tight enough to ache. You scared me half to death, he said. The nurse checking her vitals paused at the small, faded mark below her collarbone. Unusual birthmark. I don't think I've seen one shaped quite like that before. Well, actually I have. Recently. Neither of them thought much of it. Down the hall, a woman waiting on a friend's surgery caught the words in passing, and her hand went, without permission, to the same mark on her own collarbone, the one thing she'd never explained to any doctor in 26 years. Adee sat with that for 11 minutes before she made herself walk to the nurse's station. The patient 2 doors down. The birthmark. Could I see her? She stepped into the room pale, hand pressed to her own collarbone. I know this sounds insane, but I need to ask you something. Were you adopted? From an orphanage in Seoul? Yes, Queenie said slowly. I gave up a daughter 26 years ago. Her father left when I told him I was pregnant. Years later I got sick, cancer, and had no one. A man named Jamin paid for my treatment before he asked for anything back. We married after I recovered. I never let myself look for her. I didn't think I deserved to. Her eyes dropped to the mark. I have the same one. My mother did too. You said you knew what it felt like, Queenie whispered. At the hotel. You said you weren't going to watch it happen to someone else. I didn't know why it mattered so much. I do now. Hansuk arrived and stopped dead in the doorway. You were there. At the hotel. You gave her your phone. Adee nodded, unable to speak. Hansuk crossed the room and folded her into an embrace neither of them expected. Then you already knew how to protect her before either of us told you why it mattered. Weeks later, on the balcony, the city loud below them, Queenie said the thing she'd been carrying since the investor dinner. If we have children and someone ever says something like that in front of them, they won't hear it twice, Suhu said. Not from anyone who matters, and not without me in the room to end it. Our children will never wonder if they're wanted. And if it still gets to me, even years from now, then you tell me when it does. You don't carry it alone in a hallway at midnight anymore. That's the whole difference between what almost ended us and what's going to make this last. She let herself believe him completely, without reservation, without a year hanging over either of their heads. Across the city, Hansuk and Adee sat together some evenings now, an unlikely friendship built entirely out of the daughter they shared. Queenie didn't need the world's approval. She needed the man who'd chosen her before she let herself be chosen, and the 2 women who'd both refused to let her stand alone. That was the whole of it. That was enough. To everybody watching this, what people whisper about you is never the truth about you. It was only ever the truth about them. You don't owe anyone your smallness to make them comfortable, and you don't have to shrink to be loved right. The love that's meant for you will never ask you to apologize for taking up space. Let this be the reminder. You were never the problem in that room. Thank you for watching Afro-Korean Vibes. We'll see you in the next one.